Now, the seesaw between war and Georgia is enough to make you blanch. Could there be, though, a glimmer of diplomatic hope tonight? After a weekend of heavy shelling in the east of Ukraine, accompanied by barrages of disinformation, a lengthy phone call between Presidents Putin and Macron. The Elysee palace said they would try and secure a ceasefire. The Kremlin offered a rather grudging da. But the day began here remembering those who died 8 years ago in Maidan Square when Ukrainians claimed the Russian aggression started. Religion is politics in this crisis, and this Sunday service at St. Michael's Cathedral was no exception. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church broke from the Russian one a few years ago, a schism that President Putin took personally. But then there is the role of this particular church. Today they remember the so-called Heavenly 100 of Maidan, the anti-regime protesters who were gunned down in the square nearby, probably by pro-Russian government snipers. To Ukrainians, this is the day that Russia's aggression started, and the current crisis is just the latest chapter in a war that began 8 years ago. We visited St. Michael's in those dark days of 2014. It had been turned into a field hospital for the injured of Maidan. Today's service was also a reunion for many of those who'd helped out here 8 years ago. And given the rhetoric and the dire predictions, perhaps this was also the last Sunday Mass before the outbreak of war.
2 weeks ago I was not so nervous, but when you watch TV, when you listen to the radio, when you read newspapers, these words...
you get nervous?
Yes.
If there is an invasion from Russia, what will you do?
I was a partisan.
You were?
Yeah.
You were a partisan?
Yes.
And you will be one again?
Yeah.
You will fight?
Yeah, of course.
If there's a Russian invasion, what will you do?
I will become a soldier.
Really?
I will fight with Russia because if my country need me, I do that.
Yeah. Nervous laughter or blind optimism? We may find out soon. 3 hours up the road in Belarus, this had been billed as the grand finale yesterday of the drills, after which Russian troops were supposed to return home. But in another ominous sign, President Lukashenko claims that they've decided to stay on because of the increased fighting in eastern Ukraine. Moscow's heavy metal diplomacy is matched by dire warnings from Western leaders who use words to compensate for the lack of military guarantees over Ukraine.
The plan that we're seeing is for something that could be really the biggest war in Europe since 1945, just in terms of sheer scale.
Talking of 1945, this is not a historical reenactment, but a real Ukrainian trench on the real front line, which is also the front line in the war of disinformation. Russian-backed rebels say they're being provoked by Ukraine. This Ukrainian soldier begs to differ.
На даний час ми не відповідаємо тому, щоб не спровокувати. О, це вже сюди б'ють, по КСП.
In Moscow itself, a lone anti-war demonstrator was immediately arrested. The Kremlin fears the contagion of democracy from Ukraine. No, this is not the beginning of war, but the end of the Olympics in Beijing. China's moment in the limelight, unspoiled by conflict. But could the end of one signal the start of the other? And by the way, those domes you can see behind me, that is the Cathedral of St. Michael that we were in this morning. Well, a short time ago, I spoke to the exiled leader of Belarus's democratic opposition, Svetlana Tikhonovskaya, and I asked her if she was worried that the extension of planned military drills in Belarus suggested that Russia might use her country as a staging post for an invasion into Ukraine.
The situation is concerning Belarusians a lot because we don't want to be aggressors towards Ukrainian. We feel very sympathetic for their movement, for their choice, and I hope that Belarusian army will not participate in any military actions against Ukraine. And look, we are peaceful, a neutral country, and we want to stay like this in future.
But it does look at the moment, does it not, as if President Putin is co-opting President Lukashenko, at least in the military preparations for some kind of war, should it come to a war.
Yeah, that's true. Today, all the military drills have to be over in Belarus, but we see that the troops are still here, and how long these military drills will continue, nobody knows. But we demand the immediate withdrawal of Russian troops from our territory. The presence of Russian troops in our territory violates our constitution, international law, and endangers the security of each Belarusian and the entire region. Belarus now is drawn into a foreign war, turned into an aggressor country, and Lukashenko has lost his independence in decision-making, and he's paying for the support of the Kremlin, and now we are seeing consequences.
Do you think that what we're seeing here is the creeping de facto annexation of Belarus by Russia?
It's too early to say about annexation, but we see that Lukashenko now is so fragile and vulnerable, and he can be used by the third country in their advantage.
You're at the Munich Global Security Conference, and there's been some very strong language in support of Ukraine. I just wonder whether you think that NATO should have done more to support Ukraine, maybe a long time ago.
No, I think that situation in Ukraine has been very unstable through recent years, and maybe time was wasted. Maybe nobody believed in such consequences of the situation. But I think it's a high time for all the democracies, to think once again how much they are ready to protect the countries that need this support. And of course, Belarusians are looking at Ukraine and how democratic world, Western world, will help in this difficult situation.
And finally, Svetlana, can you ever imagine yourself returning home to a free and democratic Belarus?
I'm sure that one day I will come back to my motherland, and I'm going to live in Minsk, in Belarus, not somewhere else. And I'm doing everything possible for my dream to come true. But I call for all the countries to support Belarus in our difficult times, because only unity and consistency will save all of us.
Does that make you an optimist rather than a realist?
No, I try to be realistic, because I know Belarusians. I know how they cherish our independence, how much they want changes in our country.
Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Bye.
Now, to be honest, the end of the Winter Olympics, thousands of miles from here, is greeted with a degree of nervousness in Kyiv, together with a growing analysis that President Putin and his tight inner circle care much less about those severe sanctions that the West assumes will make a big difference here. And also the fortress mentality inside the Kremlin is dictating their calculations of risk. We simply can't say for sure. What we do know, though, is that Western leaders are desperate to continue talking to Moscow, even as their warnings get more dire by the day.